Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and to another video. And in today's video, I'm going to be telling another story about a horse who had an enormous impact on my life. About a month ago now, I made a video about my very first hard horse, who was my childhood pony Chic. A lot of people seemed to like it, and I thought that I would kind of turn it into a little bit of a series. So I'm gonna call it The Horses Who Made Me, because in the same way that horses are a product of every single human that they've come into contact with through training or handling, I think that as equestrians, we are all a product of the horses who we love, the horses who we care about, and the horses that we have had the privilege to spend time with and handle. Throughout my life, I've been really lucky to have spent a lot of time with some pretty incredible horses who have all taught me some very valuable lessons. And the horse I'm going to talk about today is definitely one of those. So without further ado, let's get into it. Today, I'm going to be talking about my high school lease mare, Annabelle. So in a similar way that I did with the video about Chic, I'm going to talk a little bit about my story with Annabelle and then some of the lessons that she taught me. But first, a little bit about her. So Annabelle was a 1997 Canadian sport horse mare. She was 16.2 hands, so not like the biggest horse, but she was very, like, we affectionately referred to her as a bit of a tank because she was just wide and strong and like solid. Like you always kind of felt like she was a horse you could depend on. And she was a chestnut mare with these beautiful dapples, a thick wavy tail, and a lovely wide blaze and the kindest eyes. She was originally from Ontario, where she was bred, and she showed up to the adult owner amateur hunters, which are like the 3'3", 3'6" hunter classes. She showed at places like Caledon, Palgrave, Collingwood. So that is kind of her story for the first 8-9 years of her life. She was purchased by a friend of mine and continued to show on the circuits, and she did really well. She was just a really solid, dependable show horse. So my story with her starts, I guess, in 2009 when I was 13. I started riding her a little bit then when her owner would go on vacation. Until this point, I had only really ridden ponies, so this was the first time that I was really riding a proper big horse, and it was such a huge deal for me to be trusted with such a big and lovely and fancy horse, and riding her a little bit that year really gave me confidence. So while Chic, who was my childhood pony, was off and rehabbing his suspensory ligament injury, I was lucky enough to be able to ride a variety of horses now and again. Annabelle was one of many horses that I rode a little bit off and on throughout that rehab period, and it really meant a lot to me. But it was in 2010 that I really started riding her a little bit more seriously. My memory doesn't serve me very well in this regard, so I've kind of looked to Facebook and found pictures. So I was riding her a bit in March and April, and then I was riding her a bit in the summer of 2010. So at this point, I wasn't leasing her because we still had Chic, but I started taking a few lessons on her in June and July, with the plan being that I would show her at one of our local shows in August. Unfortunately, the plans for that show didn't work out, but the prep that we did, I want to say I took maybe 5 or 6 lessons on her. The prep that we did for that show led me to jumping my first full courses at 3 feet, which for me was a really huge deal. It meant that I started to step up and really kind of improve my equitation and my technique over fences, and really started to become a bit more competitive in my show jumping. So in the fall of 2010, Annabelle left for a lease at another barn for a few months, and then 2011 came, which was the year that we decided to sell Chic and that I started to ride Annabelle more consistently. I started taking lessons on her weekly in the spring, and the idea was that once Chic sold, I would start leasing her. Her owner was incredible in allowing me this time to do the slow transition to getting used to her again and riding her while we were looking for a home for Chic. So over this kind of spring and summer of 2011, I took her to a few local schooling shows so that we could get some off-property and showing miles under our belt. We did a lot of like 2'6" and 2'9", just to dip our toes into showing together and learning how to navigate the show world as a pair, because every pairing of horse and rider is going to be different. The dynamic is going to be different, and there's always this period where you're learning each other. And though I had been riding her on and off for 3 years, it was literally a ride here and there. So this was the first time that I was really trying to get to know her as a partnership between the two of us and as a horse that I would be riding consistently going forward. And these schooling shows were always a lot of fun because a lot of my friends from my boarding barn, but also just kind of from around our local area would be there, and it was just a really nice time to get to show together. Over the course of the summer of 2011, Annabelle and I were getting to know each other and working through a few issues. When I started leasing her, she had a habit of stopping at fences, especially off property, so we had to kind of work through that before I felt comfortable taking her to a rated show. And by the time that we went to our first rated show in August of 2011, that problem had pretty much gone away, and we thought we had worked through it. Our first big rated show was a week-long show at Gingerwood Farm, which is a beautiful venue on Prince Edward Island on the east coast of Canada. Even though I live in Ontario now, I'm actually from the east coast of Canada, and the equestrian community there is quite small. It's kind of one of those like everybody knows each other type thing. The showing options there are very limited, and there used to be a week-long, well, it was like 2 3-day shows combined in 1 week. And I was super excited because 3 years previously in 2008, I had gone there with a group of friends and I had groomed, and I remember the experience being so incredible that I never thought that I would be able to show there. Little did I know, 3 years later, I would be there on Annabelle. So the show at Gingerwood was split up into 2 3-day shows with a day off in between. For the first show, we registered for Low Hunter, which was 2'6", and Children's Hunter, which was kind of like the under 18 3-foot division. Before the show started, we went up a day early and there was like a day of warm-ups, and I remember the warm-ups went pretty well, but we did have a few issues. My old nemesis was always the long run to an oxer, like to a single oxer. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just that the fences were so big, but I always just panicked about finding a distance and I would clam up, and as a result that would cause Annabelle to stop. But we worked through some issues on that day and went into the Low Hunter 2'6" division and did pretty well. Like, we got around. I was under no delusion that I would be placing super high in the rankings because I was up against more experienced people with a lot more show miles under their belt. And then we went in for the Children's Hunter, and I went in, I don't even know if I got around a single round, but we got eliminated because of stopping. And in hindsight, I think that elimination was probably a bit of a result of me being timid. I was still very green at the 3-foot level, and that probably reignited some of the issues with stopping that Annabelle and I had worked through. But it was a really good learning experience, and we went into the second show that week with a modified plan of how we would go about things. So I scratched from the Children's Hunter division and entered instead into the Modified Hunter. We went in and we did the Low Hunter again, which is 2'6", and then the Modified Hunter was like a 2'9" kind of combined division, and it was a much more successful and confidence building show. We won a few ribbons and had some nice rounds. That being said, I did fall off in my last of the, I think it was the Modified Hunter rounds. I remember we were going around and I was having like my best round of the show, like absolute best round of the show. And we were coming down the final line and we got to the oxer and I was just like, oh my God, yes, this is so great. And I just completely abandoned Annabelle and she stopped and I fell off. I remember laying on my back and the line was like right next to the judge's booth. And after I fell off, she ran to the gate to my coach where my mom was also standing. And I was just laying on my back, like absolutely dying of laughter. And I think the judge or the steward or someone mistook it for me, like, I don't know, crying or whatever, because I remember someone rushed over to me and was like, are you okay? And they saw that I was laughing. And yeah, it was just a really funny experience. And after our somewhat rocky experience at Gingerwood Farm, I entered a clinic at a friend's farm and it was exactly what I needed. My last experience with jumping Annabelle 3 foot off property was when we got eliminated at Gingerwood. But by the end of the clinic with Jen, we were doing full courses and starting to do some like derby style lines. And we were playing around with some broken lines and some rollbacks. Annabelle and I think, learned a lot about each other throughout the course of 2011. And it was also a really turbulent year for me because, you know, making the decision to sell Chic was not easy. And I think it was cushioned a bit by the fact that I knew that I had this incredible opportunity waiting for me after he was sold. I was feeling so conflicted because while I was having this incredible experience with her and getting to know her and developing a partnership and a bond with her, I was still absolutely crushed about the fact that we had made the decision, but it was like the right time to sell Chic. Then 2012 came. Throughout the winter, we built confidence. We did a lot of like gymnastics and trot jumping indoors. The indoor arena at the barn wasn't super huge, so we couldn't really do big technical courses. So winter was a perfect time to work on your basics and your techniques. We did a lot of jumping with no stirrups, no hands, and then eventually both. Unfortunately, don't have any videos of those. But I do have video of one lesson that I distinctly remember because we were trotting into a single vertical and my coach just kept upping the height and eventually it got up to 3'3" and it terrified me, but also really, I think, developed more of a deeper sense of trust between me and Annabelle.
Good girl.
You are there. More surprise. Just follow. You are. All right.
So 2012 was also my first full show season on her. So same thing as in 2011, early spring was kind of filled with lessons and local schooling shows. We were showing in the 2'9" and the 3 feet. And by the time our first rated show came around, my kind of confidence issues and timidity showing or jumping 3 feet was kind of gone. We went out doing the low and children's hunters, and I also started doing some derby classes and more kind of technical hunter riding. What I consider a full show season and what other people consider a full show season are two very different things, because in 2012 I only did 3 rated shows. So I did 2 at Restless Pines Farm, which is near Halifax, and another one at the Windsor Showgrounds. There's always 2 shows at the Windsor Showgrounds, but I only ever did the one in the summer. The one at Windsor Summer is always fun because it's an indoor show, and that's not something you get a lot of on the East Coast. You know, even though I was comfortable showing at 3 feet, I was still overcoming a lot of imposter syndrome, which never really went away, but we won some ribbons and we had a lot of fun. So then we went into 2013, and this was the year that my lease ended on Annabelle and our final show season together. It was a similar kind of story as 2012. We started out the season doing lessons, doing some schooling shows, and then we did some shows at Restless Pines and we did Windsor Summer. Throughout my time leasing her, I battled with a lot of negative self-talk, but also negative talk from other people about the fact that I wasn't a very good rider and that I didn't have what it took to win. Early on in my time leasing her, I developed this goal to win a cooler. I wanted to be children's champion at one show. There were a lot of people that I knew who were winning coolers all the time, and it was just never something in 3 years of showing that I ever thought would happen to me. But in 2013, that goal came true, and Annabelle and I were children's hunter champion at the Windsor Summer Show. I was 17 at the time, Annabelle was 16, and we won our first and last cooler at a rated show together. It kind of acted as a bit of a band-aid to a lot of the negative ideas I had about myself and my ability as a rider. I was super, super happy, and I remember crying really hard. And then in the fall, my lease on Annabelle came to an end. So I then went on to ride other horses. I leased another horse throughout my grade 12 year, and then I went to university. For a bunch of different reasons, I didn't see Annabelle for 6 years after my lease ended in 2013. But in 2019, I went out to visit her with her owner. And yeah, it was exactly the closure that I needed after our time together and everything that she had meant to me. You know, she was such a special horse, and getting to see her after so long, living out in a herd full of friends, it made me so, so, so happy. I was 23, and it was 10 years after I had first started riding her, and it was just like a full circle moment. It was so, so, so wonderful. So that's kind of my story with Annabelle in terms of like what we did and the different experiences we had together. One of my favorite things to think about when I'm evaluating relationships and experiences that I have with people and with horses is to think about like the lessons that I learned and how it changed me as a person. I learned so much from Annabelle in the 5 years that I rode her that I think it really useful to talk about. So one of the biggest things that Annabelle kind of taught me is the benefit of a schoolmaster and also the value of leasing. So for me, those two things kind of went hand in hand. Annabelle for me was very much a schoolmaster who taught me a lot about riding. So she was 14 when I started leasing her. At that point, she had, I want to say, nearly 10 years of showing under her belt. She had shown at so many different venues with so many different people. She had a lot of knowledge and experience that she passed on to me. Yes, there were some issues that we had to work through at the beginning of our lease, but by the time that the lease ended, I had learned so much that I'm so grateful to her for teaching me all those things. Yes, you know, I was in lessons with a coach and my coach taught me a lot, but I think I learned just as much from the horse as I did from the people. And while also talking about the benefit of a schoolmaster, I can talk about the value of leasing. Because for someone like me who doesn't come from a lot of money, leasing is an incredible way to gain experience as an equestrian and to get the chance to ride a sort of caliber of horse that I wouldn't have access to otherwise. I'm gonna put the next two things together. One is that I was good enough, despite what both myself and others told me, and also that competing isn't everything. As I mentioned a little bit earlier in this video, my time showing with Annabelle, I still have conflicting feelings towards it, because while the experiences and the memories that I made actually in the show ring with her, jumping over those fences, getting through those courses, you know, winning some ribbons, they're wonderful memories. In some ways, they're tainted a little bit by the things that some people said to me and the way that I was treated for having a lease horse and being in a borrowed truck and trailer and having, you know, cheap riding clothes and only being able to go to a few shows a year. I was treated dismissively, and like my participation in the show didn't matter as much as some of the other people, because I was only, you know, it was my one big show a year rather than one of a bunch. And that really took a toll on my self-esteem. But every time that I looked at Annabelle and I saw the trust in her eyes, all of that melted away. And just spending time with her always reminded me of the fact that I didn't get into riding to do competing. When I was in the kind of midst of show season, sometimes I could forget, I could get caught up in the training and the prep and working so many long hours. I kind of got lost sometimes in all of that. There would be these moments where I would go out and just hang out with her, and it would just remind me that, like, I'm doing it because I love the animal. And it's taken me a really long time to sort through the way that I was treated and the really complex feelings that I have towards that time in my life. And unfortunately, the way that I was treated did kind of make me lose my love of competing, but I'm slowly starting to get back to a point where I can see myself competing Merlin one day. I highly doubt it will ever be in the hunters. I just think that there are so many issues with the hunter world, the way that it's judged, the way that it upholds certain values about looks, and how the idea of perfection is striven towards and rewarded. And I think it can cause some serious self-esteem issues in the people who show in that industry. But anyways, despite the negativity that came with showing sometimes, Annabelle didn't care about that. All Annabelle cared about was the fact that I really cared for her and that I gave her as much of my heart as I was physically capable of. And I think that she knew that. And in those moments, I really felt like I was good enough, even though some of the people that I was showing against, people that I like didn't know, like just these random people who were in the same division, I would hear them making snide comments, or I would be listening, like in some of the audio recordings, like some of the videos that I have of me showing in the background, you can hear people commenting on my round and my riding ability, and watching them as I'm making this video has been hard, because it's like these incredible memories with Annabelle and the realization that I was so negative on myself at the time. Like, I was so hard on myself for, like, oh, I missed that distance, we chipped in that fence, when looking back, like, a lot of the rounds that I did were decent. You know, they weren't perfect. I wasn't always the best technical rider, but they were okay. They were fine. They were good. But you can hear voices in the background while my mom is like recording these videos of people talking shit about me. And this is where the video gets hard. In October of 2021, Annabelle sadly passed away. She spent her last moments in her field, surrounded by her friends, which in my mind is the way that it should be when it's time for horses to go. She was an incredibly special horse, and she gave so much to so many people over the course of her life. And I know that anybody who knew her in real life would agree with me when I say that. She was 24 years old when she passed away, and she had lived an incredibly full life. I was in the arena with Merlin doing groundwork when I found out the news. Her owner was nice enough to send me a message and to let me know. I was one of the first ones to know, and that really, it really means a lot. And I started crying. I'm so happy that I was with Merlin when I got the news, because it just felt like this full circle moment, I guess. You know, throughout most of high school, that mare was my entire life. I'm not gonna get too much into it, but she saw me through the diagnosis and the dark days of various mental illnesses, self-doubt, and crises of self-worth, issues with eating, things like that. I loved her so much, and I'm always going to be grateful for the memories. So I'm going to end this video with a little tribute to her. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to join the channel and stick around to see what an incredible horse she was. And I will see you next time. Bye.
Ten toes in my bankroll. Why you running away from me? I don't know. The thirsty on me, Paco. Why you running away from me? I don't know. I maybe see me say I missed that little feeling when I kissed your face. Apnea garum, I was feeling so warm, now I'm feeling so cold. Can you come and hold me? I don't think I'm okay. Tell me that you're okay. Every single thought inside my brain replaces your face. I don't think I'm okay. Tell me that you're okay. Every single thought inside my brain replaces your face. I don't like fighting, so it's alright. Fighting when I don't like dying. Let it go. Yeah, let it go. 10 toes in my bankroll. Why you running away from me? I don't know. The thirsty on me, Paco. Why you running away from me? I don't know. 'Cause I don't like fighting, so it's alright. Fighting when I don't like dying. Let it go. Yeah, let it go. It's been a while since we last spoke, baby. You were so cold that you drove me crazy. Don't know where to go, lose control. Think I need to let it go.